Okay, so chapter 37 of Jeremiah is we're almost back up to where we were before. If you remember, before chapter 36, we were at the time where Jeremiah had bought the land from his cousin and had been given some revelations to give about Zedekiah. So now chapter 37 is going to be the chapter just before that happened. So this is going to tell us why was Jeremiah in the court of the prison and not all the way in the prison, basically. So if you had that thought back then, we're going to answer that today in this chapter. So we're almost there. So now verse 1, and King Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, reigned instead of Coniah, which is short for Jehoiakim, or not Jehoiakim, that's his dad, Jehoiakim. This is Jehoiachin, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, made king in the land of Judah. So Zedekiah was appointed by Nebuchadnezzar to be the king of the king of Judah. Too many king names going through my mind. Sorry. Okay, so that's where we're at. So we're in the intermediary period again, basically, but not quite up to where we were before. So we're just this is like the backstory to why was Jeremiah in jail and dealing with all that stuff. Verse 2, but neither he nor his servants nor the people of the land did hearken unto the words of the Lord, which he spake by the prophet Jeremiah. So in the Old Testament Study Guide it says, when King Jehoiachin rebelled against Babylon, he was deposed and his uncle Zedekiah was placed on the throne. By this time it should have been obvious that Jeremiah's prophecies were coming to pass. Twice Nebuchadnezzar had come, and twice he had humbled Judah. But Zedekiah was no wiser than his brother Jehoiakim and his nephew Jehoiachin. He too began to look for ways to break the Babylonian yoke. Ignoring the repeated warnings of Jeremiah, he rebelled, and once again the Babylonians came against Jerusalem. So remember, Jehoiakim was more pro-Egyptian. He was appointed when Josiah died, Jehoiakim took over. Basically, he was pro-Egyptian. So Assyria was being wiped out. Babylon's coming in, taking over everything. So when Babylon marched down, Jehoiakim wasn't favorable to Babylon. So Jehoiakim lost, basically. His son stepped up in his stead, but again, he was the ruler when Babylon marched through, and so he got taken off the throne, put into exile in the first exile when Babylon marched through, after taking care of fighting off Egypt and getting them out of the way. Before I believe it was the battle, that might have been the Battle of Carchemish, I think, when they were up further north, when Egypt was up trying to help Assyria out. So that happens. Babylon's wiping up everything else through the destruction of the Assyria. And so Zedekiah is now appointed to be the king in Judah, basically. But they're not listening. So verse 3, and Zedekiah the king sent Jehukal the son of Shelemiah and Zephaniah the son of Maaseiah the priest to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, pray now unto the Lord our God for us. So these are two people. Zedekiah went to them and said, I need you guys to go tell Jeremiah a message. And part of that message is, I need you to ask him to pray to God for us. Ask God for help. So they're at this time when Babylon's coming down. Zedekiah's been in reign for about 10, 11-ish years. Babylon's now hitting him again. They're in trouble. Verse 4, now Jeremiah came in and went out among the people, for they had not put him into prison. So this is before he got put into prison, basically. That's where we're at. Now it's interesting, Zedekiah sent his servants. He didn't go ask Jeremiah himself. And part of the challenge is Zedekiah he's a wimp. I mean, he is so worried about public opinion that he does some weird things sometimes. He doesn't want the people to hate him. He wants the people to like him and see him as the king, because Jehoiachin is still seen as the rightful ruler. Zedekiah is seen as the appointed ruler. They're like, yeah, you're king now, only because Babylon put you there. But Jehoiachin, your nephew, is the real king, and we want him back. So Zedekiah's got a problem with people don't want to follow him all the time. They don't fully agree with him. So he wants to keep public opinion on his side, but he can't be seen asking Jeremiah for help because Jeremiah is the anti-nation prophet. He's the one that's saying, guys, we just need to surrender to Babylon. He's the one that's not nationalistic. And so he's seen as the traitor. So if Zedekiah is seen as the traitor, that could be bad for Zedekiah. He doesn't want that. So he's sending intermediaries in his place, basically. And it's interesting. He doesn't really believe he doesn't really have faith in God, but he's looking for whatever he can to get help, basically. So that's what's happening here. This is before he got put into prison. Now, verse 5, then Pharaoh's army was come forth out of Egypt. And when the Chaldeans that besieged Jerusalem heard tidings of them, they departed from Jerusalem. So this is 588 BC. Egypt is coming to help. That was the alliance that Jehoiakim had with Egypt, is that they would help them out. And Zedekiah had been planning that as well to do that. That was the plans. You read about that in the book, in the Lachish letters, in that video as well. We talk about that. And this is what all the prophets were warning Zedekiah and the others about, is that alliance is a bad deal. We need to stick with Babylon and work with them. So that Egypt is coming in to help. And so Babylon has moved their armies away from Jerusalem for the most part and is going after Egypt, basically, right at this point. So that's what's happening, basically. So Zedekiah is asking for help from other people. That's even in the Lachish letters. There's letters back and forth between Zedekiah and Egypt saying, come help us. They come help, and then they're coordinating with the other Jewish cities, basically to try to coordinate these efforts to deal with Babylon. So verse 4, now Jeremiah came in and went out among the people. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Verse 5 I read. Verse 6, then came the word of the Lord unto the prophet Jeremiah, saying, thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, thus shall ye say to the king of Judah, that sent you unto me to inquire of me. Behold, so Jeremiah is praying to God, going, okay, God, the king has asked me to pray in his behalf for you. What is the message I need to give him? So this is the message God is saying, here's what I want you to tell Zedekiah. Thus shall you say to the king of Judah that sent you, behold, Pharaoh's army, which is come forth to help you, shall return to Egypt into their own land. Now Zedekiah is hoping Egypt can be victorious at pushing, not destroying Babylon, but pushing Babylon out of the area, basically. So to hear God tell him, hey, so basically Zedekiah is like, hey, will you go tell Jeremiah to pray and ask God to help us? So Jeremiah's like, okay, I'll go pray and ask God to help us. And God is saying, okay, Jeremiah, here's what you're going to tell him. Egypt is going to abandon you. They're going to go back to their town. You're going to be left alone. Not good. Verse 8, and the Chaldeans shall come again and fight against the city and shall take it and burn it with fire. So not only is Egypt leaving, but Babylon's coming back to Jerusalem and they will finish the job. They will fully destroy everything. Verse 9, thus saith the Lord, deceive not yourselves, saying the Chaldeans shall surely depart from us, for they shall not depart. Now there's probably the other, we've talked in the past about the other false prophets that are in the area, basically. They're probably predicting, oh, look, Egypt is our savior. Egypt's coming to help us. They'll defeat Babylon. Babylon will go away. And so this is going against the majority advice and saying, nope, Babylon's coming back. Egypt's going away. We're going to be destroyed. So that's basically what verse 9 is talking about here. So in fact, it says here, that last line, for they shall not depart. Thus the Lord, deceive not yourselves, saying the Chaldeans shall depart from us, for they shall not depart. That last line is a Hebrew expression which means don't get your hopes up. Basically, they're going to come back and destroy you. You're done. Don't get your hopes up about this. Verse 10, for though ye had smitten the whole army of the Chaldeans that fight against you, and there remained but wounded men among them, yet should they rise up every man in his tent and burn this city with fire. Oh, that's a tough one. Oh, my heck. So think about this, okay? What God just said there is, look, Judah, let's say Babylon comes back and you're able to actually inflict a major wound, a good wound, on every Babylonian soldier. So the whole army is wounded. You're good health, they're wounded. You are still going to lose to them. That's how bad it's going to be. You stand no chance, Judah, is really what that analogy comes down to. Even if you could wound the whole army, they're still going to be victorious. Oh, that's a hard one for Judah, basically. Now, verse 11, and it came to pass that when the army of the Chaldeans was broken up from Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army, then Jeremiah went forth out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to separate himself thence in the midst of the people. So now it is very likely he's heading home because Jeremiah is from the land of Benjamin. It could be that there was a family matter that needed to be resolved due to the Babylonian destruction, or maybe he was going home to get that land, basically, from his relative. We don't know why he went, basically, in verse 12. We don't know why Jeremiah went up there. He could gone out there to see, is the homestead still here after Babylon was here? Are you guys still okay? Is there still stuff? And they're like, oh, Jeremiah, you're alive. Okay, great, and that's what it could be. Verse 13, and when he was in the gate of Benjamin, a captain of the ward was there whose name was Irijah, the son of Shelemiah and son of Hananiah, and he took Jeremiah the prophet, saying, thou fallest away to the Chaldeans. So this is why Jeremiah was arrested, and basically, during this intermediary period. This captain of the Jewish army thought Jeremiah was fleeing to Babylon. He was being a traitor. So that's what's happening here. So they think he's defecting, basically. And so they arrested him. And they took him prisoner, basically. Now, there were many who did defect. There was a lot of this. If, you didn't die if you defected, basically. So they thought, because Jeremiah was teaching people, we all need to surrender to Babylon to live, that he was defecting as well. So verse 14, then said Jeremiah, it is false. I fall not away to the Chaldeans. But he hearkened not to him, so the captain didn't believe him. So Irijah took Jeremiah and brought him to the princes. So now he's been brought back to Jerusalem during that intermediary lull. Verse 15, wherefore the princes were wroth with Jeremiah and smote him and put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they had made that the prison. So they kind of didn't have like official jail cells like we have today. Sometimes they had a place where they put their jail cells, their prisoners, but sometimes it was, we're going to take over a house and just lock you in this house, and that's our jail. So that's kind of what's happening here. In fact, Thompson, in his book of Jeremiah, he says, it was a temporary prison in the house of Jonathan, the state secretary. Why his house should have been used as a prison is not stated. Possibly other prisons were full, or perhaps the secretary's house was regarded as particularly secure. It would appear from the difficult Hebrew text that Jeremiah's place of confinement was an underground dungeon. It was in the vaults in the cistern house. In chapter 38, verse 6 and 13, he is cast into a cistern. So we'll see another part of this story in the next chapter. He was thrown into a cistern. So that's like a well. He was tossed into a well. Now, when we think of a well, we're thinking of that long cylindrical tube that goes into the ground where you lower your bucket down to get the water and bring it up. Back then, it wasn't that way, basically. So let's look at this. Okay. Here it is into the cistern house. It was, in any case, an unhealthy place where he would certainly have died before long. Even so, he was there for some time. It was this place that Zedekiah sent for him. So he's down in this well. What basically was it was like a big hole that what happened is they would fill it with water. When the rains would come, the rains would soak into the sand and start to drain out. They would capture that in this area that kind of create a cavern for the water to kind of collect into, and that's where it would stay, and then they could drain the water out slowly for the rest of the year. So this is like there's lots of silt and sand and mud in there. So he is like stuck in this big hole of mud, basically, which probably smells from like mold and because it's underground, and lots of maybe there's animal feces and other things that could be down in there, like rats and stuff. Not a good place. And he's like, oh crap, I'm like contract some weird bug and die. Of course, they didn't know what viruses were back then, but they're like, this is a place where you're going to die. So this is a miserable place for Jeremiah to be. That's where he was put. So all right, let's move on here. Verse 16, when Jeremiah was entered into the dungeon and into the cabins, and Jeremiah had remained there many days. Then Zedekiah the king sent and took him out, and the king asked him secretly in his house. Again, Zedekiah is wanting to talk to Jeremiah, but not let the people know he's using Jeremiah, because the people would hate Zedekiah for that. So he was definitely a wimp when it came to combating public opinion. He wanted the people to like him. So he says, is there any word from the Lord? And Jeremiah said, there is. For, said he, thou shalt be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon. So again, not that good news that Zedekiah was hoping to get. But the bad news is Zedekiah is going to be prisoner of Babylon. Verse 18, moreover, Jeremiah said unto King Zedekiah, what have I offended against thee, or against thy servants, or against this people, that ye have put me in prison? So Jeremiah is going, why have I been put in prison? Why am I here? What am I being accused of, basically? Verse 19, where are now your prophets, which prophesied unto you, saying, the king of Babylon shall not come against you, nor against this land? So now Jeremiah is not only saying, why did you throw me in jail? But now he's going, where are your prophets? You want me to pray to God, but where are your prophets who pray to the false gods? Why aren't they here? Why aren't they giving you counsel? Why are you seeking counsel from me? So in the Old Testament study manual, it made an interesting comment about this. He says here, Jeremiah's sarcastic question to Zedekiah is recorded in Jeremiah 37:19. The false prophets had promised that the Babylonians would not come against Jerusalem and the captives already taken would be returned. At that time, Jeremiah cited the words of Moses for determining the true from the false prophets. Now, with the Babylonians surrounding the city, Jeremiah asked where all those other prophets were. Jeremiah's word had been proven true, and he was in prison. Their word had been proven false, and where were they? If you remember from previous chapters, there was a confrontation at the temple when Jeremiah was prophesying what he said, and one of the major false prophets prophesied wrong. Remember the whole idea of the yoke? Jeremiah brought the yoke, and the other guy broke it, and those things. So that Jeremiah's like, where are all those prophets? Babylon's here again. I'm right. They're wrong. Why are, what's the deal here, basically? Why am I in jail? So verse 20, Jeremiah continues on. He says, therefore hear now, I pray thee, O my lord the king, let my supplication, I pray thee, be accepted before thee, that thou cause me not to return to the house of Jonathan the scribe, lest I die there. So Jeremiah is worried about going back. He's pleading with the king, don't send me back to the dungeon. I'm afraid I'm going to die there, basically. It's a terrible place to go. Verse 21, then Zedekiah the king commanded that they should commit Jeremiah into the court of the prison, and that they should give him daily a piece of bread out of the baker's street, until all the bread in the city were spent. Thus Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So the Zedekiah went, okay, I'm sorry, you're right. They upgraded Jeremiah's prison to the court. So a nicer place to live, not in the dungeon, a clean place for him to live, and they fed him and took care of him. So Zedekiah doesn't want, I think Zedekiah believes in Jeremiah. He believes what Jeremiah is saying, because he's looking at this going, this is what Jeremiah said, and it's happening. So Jeremiah's right, but I can't admit that to the people because the people hate Jeremiah. So they're making sure, though, that Jeremiah survives the siege. So Babylon's back. The siege is back on, and they're slowly starving to death. Jeremiah is going to be preserved from this. So now, let's continue on in the next chapter to see this happen. So this gives us the backstory of why was Jeremiah in the court of the prison. If you remember, in the court of the prison was when his cousin showed up a couple chapters ago to ask him to buy the land. And if you remember all that, that happened about this time basically. So let's jump over to the next one as we continue forward.